Welcome into ATL Day Ones with Jarvis and Tenitra. Coming up on today's show, should Terry Fontenot go hunting?
And mandatory minicamp has kicked off for the Falcons, and there are some heavy hitters who are back on the field, and they are ready to do a couple of things that we've been telling you guys that we are here for.
And last but not least, and for the culture, say it ain't so sleepy.
This is ATL Day Ones, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
I want to start by saying thank you for making ATL Day Ones your first listen of the day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you download your podcast. And wherever you download your podcast, make sure that you leave us a 5-star review. Really appreciate that from you in advance. ATL Day Ones is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up in 5 minutes, would we really feel like Marcell Ozuna would be a piece that we would actually miss at this point in the season? Ooh, but first, we got to talk about Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter, Minnesota Vikings defensive end. He is a guy that, is not too satisfied with his contract, and he's been mulling over some things, trying to figure out how he can get paid, right? So, I start, thinking about it from the standpoint of, okay, Atlanta Falcons are sitting pretty situated at that edge spot, right? But I think that, when you're talking about adding pieces and being able to, bring some value in, I really feel like Danielle Hunter is probably a guy that Terry Fontenot should pick up the phone and give a call. What say you?
Yeah, I would say the same. I mean, at this point, yes, the linebacker core, the defensive, that whole front seven is loaded. We'll just call it
guys who can rush the passer. Yeah,
right,
yeah, that's what we're calling it now.
Yes, exactly, because pass rush matters, and that's what all we want to do is say, hey, can we get another guy in the room to affect the quarterback, right? And oftentimes players need just a fresh start, and then they can go back to showing you exactly who they are, what they could be. We're talking about a guy who had 46 solo tackles, 10 and a half sacks, a forced fumble, 10 and a half sacks, 10 and a half sacks, 10 and a half sacks. Did I say it enough times, Jarvis? 10 and
14 and a half, 14 and a half. Like a lot of sacks.
Yeah, that's a lot of sacks. He was literally in 2022 tied for 22nd in the league. He had half as many as the entire Falcons football defense in 2022. There it is. So, So when you look at him and you start stacking the deck, and one of the things Arthur Smith mentioned, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it in the deep dive, is that desire to have players who are versatile, and available, because we know that your best ability is your availability. And we know that there were times where, Jarvis, we could talk front seven, we can talk back end, we can talk any position group across the Falcons. And how many times did we say, wow, as soon as they started getting momentum, decimated with injury, decimated. So picking up the phone to see if Danielle Hunter would be interested in a conversation, a visit, if not joining the Falcons, absolutely would be the right move for the Falcons to make.
And when you think about he's on essentially has 1 year left on his contract. I think a little bit over $5 million. He's old, so you don't have to necessarily worry about that. However, I think one of the things that's going to get this deal done if they have that conversation about him getting a contract. And I think that I don't know if the Falcons, are wanting to get into a long-term deal, because we know they signing the 1 year guys like Bud Dupree and Calais Campbell and all that stuff. But I really feel like they're at a point now where you probably need to look at, especially at a premier spot, as edge rusher, defensive end, outside linebacker, whatever hell you want to call them, guys who can put the quarterback on the ground. I don't mind you jumping into a long-term deal with a guy like that at this juncture.
I say the same, right? Because if he's listed technically as a will linebacker, and Lorenzo Carter is technically your will linebacker, and it was interesting because it felt like one of the things Arthur Smith talked about with Ade Ogundeji yesterday was, still wanting to see him improve. There's opportunity there, but it's pretty clear he might be what we'll call sort of a rotational, situational type guy, right? Yes. If Zoe is what you got, and Ade is what you got, and technically Danielle, although he can play here and there and everywhere, if he's listed as will, you need a real will. you might want to go after that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that right now, there are some situations where you're looking at guys around the league as to, what you can add. And I think that in just a little small piece here, even like, for example, Devin White, he's guys that wants to be traded. And people are probably saying like Jarvis, Tenitra, like, wait a minute, we have a lot of stand-up linebackers. We got some young guys we want to see. It's about adding talent. And Arthur Smith has said over and over again, and I'm wholeheartedly on board with this, it's all about competition. And when you're bringing in guys that what they bring to the table, that's what they've been able to do, right, with these one-year deals. Veteran guys, you pretty much know what you're going to get. And I don't have a problem with you bringing in those guys to necessarily raise the game of the young guys that you already have on the roster. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, T. Like, Terry Fontenot, add as much talent as you possibly can, because we know how horrible they've been. I hate to use that word. They've been horrible at rushing the passer these past couple years.
But you're absolutely right. That's the right word, Jarvis. That one is one we can't sugarcoat and will not. And granted, Devin White's a little more expensive, about 18 to 23 mil, according to what ESPN is estimating. But again, he's also someone whom you've seen twice a year for the last several years, and you've seen what kind of impact he can have on the game. And put in the right situation with the right defensive coordinator, veterans around him, the competition in the room alone, all of those things might still bode fair for the Falcons, who still have a lot of money that they're able to work with. And like you said, you can keep sprinkling maybe, the 1 year prove it deals here and there. But at some point, if you're going win now, coupled with win future, then you got a guy, you have to look at guys like Devin White and Danielle Hunter, because they can give you a little bit of both. They can give you a little bit of win now, but they can possibly be pieces for the future.
Yeah, that's exactly what you need to be at this space right now. And when the Falcons, according to Over the Cap, they're probably about $10 million in cap space. So hey, they probably could work out a little deal with Danielle Hunter. I would absolutely love that. But T, I think one of the things that has been kind of amazing to me, I think I could use that word, when it comes to what Marcell Ozuna has been able to do since the month of May. Like, we know how he started. In March and April, he was absolutely terrible. Like, his batting average started with a 0, and it kind of floated around at things. But ever since the beginning of May, he has been the best hitter on this team. Yes, I said that. He's the best hitter from a number standpoint and from an average standpoint on this team since the beginning of May. And yeah, we do have Ronald Acuna, we do have Ozzy Albies, we do have Matt Olson on this team. So, yeah, that's a big statement. So, I just think right now, when he got hit on his wrist tee on Monday, I started to literally think, I was like, man, like, what are they going to do without Marcell Ozuna the way he's playing right now? And for me to be having that thought at this point in the season, given how he started, T, like, isn't that like a huge plus for the Atlanta Braves right now, for Marcell Ozuna to be contributing at this clip?
Yes, this is one of those situations where sometimes I wish I could just sit with Alex Anthopoulos and figure out how his mind works. And even Brian Sticker's a patient guy as well, but for them to just hang in there until Marcell Ozuna finally caught up to himself and finally got 9 of his 13 home runs in the month of May, and now has 29 RBI. And like you said, that OPS number has jumped to 828, and we laugh at an average jumping to 246. But like you said, when the average had been hovering at 0.0 ... for the entire first part of the season, now we're having a conversation where you had a collective gasp about the possibility that this guy was going to be out for any extended period of time. That speaks volumes. And now we're hearing more positive things as well. Not that we'd ever heard any negative things about him in the clubhouse. Let me just make that clear. But to hear the conversation that he had and the impact that he had on Michael Harris II, who said, hey, your next 2 at-bats, that's where your season starts. And you start to see Michael Harris II taking that seriously and saying, yeah, I can go out there and I can reset myself. Sometimes those are things that we don't know until we know them, right? So those are things that I'm sure there are more examples of that AA knew about, that Snit knew about, that made them say, you know what? Yeah, he can be a lot to deal with that stuff he does off the field. But for what he's doing for this clubhouse and now again at the plate, We'll take our chances on Ozone, as you call him. Or are we allowed? Jarvis, has he regained his nickname?
Yes, I've been hesitant. I'm glad you brought it up because I've been a little hesitant about calling him that because a lot of times when I'm on Twitter looking at the game and stuff like that, my guy Ozone out here, like I'm starting to get that Ozone feeling, like it's starting to finally come back, and I think with this injury, kind of confirms like you know what, I don't want to see him miss any time, like so, but it is cool to know that. He was yesterday, although the Braves got rained out, he was available to pinch hit. So that is a good sign going forward. And Brian Snitker was actually kind of surprised that he was available as well.
Yeah. That was you're absolutely right. It was very, very exciting because again, in that Monday game, he only had one at bat, but he made something work with it. At least he got one hit out of it. And then you go back to the Washington series and he just continued on his tear. And again, the home runs, 9 home runs in the month of May, that tells part of the story, but also getting hits, driving in runs, that tells the story as well. So at this point, Jarvis, where you may need your bats to do the talking for you when you're not quite sure what you're going to get out of your pitching rotation, you need him to be in that lineup.
Absolutely. And we need you to stick around because, Tenitra was out there training camp yesterday. Arthur Smith talked about, he gave some names as to who's not there, but they will be ready for training camp. We'll talk about that next. But first, I have to let you know that this episode of ATL Day Ones is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook because it is the #1 sportsbook in America. Guess what, guys? You guys have been rocking with us Monday through Friday. ATL Day Ones is #1 in your heart. I need you to make FanDuel.com #1 in your heart as well as far as your go-to sports book. The NBA playoffs just wrapped up. Guess what, guys? The baseball season is rolling and it's rocking and rolling. So guess what? They have all the information that you need right there. Just go there and check them out because the app is safe, it's secure, it's super easy to use. And guess what? For all you new customers, they have the no sweat first bet up to $2,500. Yes, I said $2,500. All you got to do is go there right now for all new customers. So, and if you're going to support Locked On, you guys been supporting us. We appreciate you. All you have to do is go to this website, FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. LOCKEDON is the #1 sportsbook in America. And guess what? It is the official sports book betting partner of the NBA.
Well, the Falcons are one day closer to training camp. They kicked off mandatory mini camp on Tuesday at the Benz. Pretty cool to be down at the Benz again, just to kind of check things out, especially because while there were 4 players who did not make it, of course, Arthur Smith announced that early on just to kind of get that out of the way. We knew that Kyle Pitts wouldn't be there because, of course, he's still rehabbing. So is Caleb Huntley. So is Eddie Goldman. And, of course, Avery Williams is out for the season. But who we did see that was really a sight for sore eyes was we saw Cordarrelle Patterson and we also saw Taquan Graham. And the reason I say that is because, of course, seeing Cordarrelle Patterson out there, just kind of being with those guys, coaching them up, that's always such a positive thing. So that was one of the observations I made too. And then I was watching Taquan Graham and his speed, looking like he was back to himself, right? In the drills that he was doing with the defensive front. So those were kind of a couple of the initial observations that I had. But one of the other observations that I wanted to kind of get your take on as well was a part of the conversation that was had pre-practice, and then you kind of saw it show up again at practice. And that was that conversation about just the continuing camaraderie that is developing, but also understanding who the leader in the building is, right? And a lot of that makes a difference if you know those things up front. So Arthur Smith talked about the excitement, the advantage of having David Onyemata on this side of the ball and not having to face the likes of him like you've had to do the last 4 years, right? Yeah. And Grady Jarrett had mentioned it to us last week, but to see those two kind of jarring back and forth in a good way and kind of conferring yesterday during practice, it was really cool because it also speaks to what David Onyemata said about the fact that Grady Jarrett is still the leader of this offense, even with all of these guys in the room, Pro Bowlers and future Hall of Famers. That's still the guy that's at the anchor. He's the core and he's the heart and soul of not just this defense, but I would argue even this entire team. But how important is it, Jarvis, and you'll be up there, of course, in Flowery Branch today, kind of seeing that interaction and kind of seeing how they're using TQ as well, hopefully. What would you say is, how critical is it, A, for those guys to be communicating so well early on, and B, for that entire defense to understand that as Grady goes both on the field and off the field, so goes this defense?
I think it kind of speaks to the level of respect that they have for Grady, not just as a man, but as a player, because that's what matters, right? Like the guys will be a little shaky, off the field. They do what they do, but when it comes to Sundays at 1 o'clock, 9-7 is going to show up, and I think that those guys truly understand, and I think that it speaks volumes to what David Onyemata said when he was talking about how this is still Grady's team, because those guys know each other. Those guys interacted with each other, not only not going up against each other specifically, but the teams playing against each other in the division, when you play for the Saints. But those guys, have spent time together, so they interact with each other, because they have there's a lot of commonalities when you think about those guys, right? Because both of those guys weren't like highly drafted, guys coming into the league and everything, and they've pretty much earned their way. They've earned everything that they've gotten since they stepped into the door. So for those guys to be, on new contracts and having the respect around the league, and Arthur Smith talking about Onyemata being a guy who's a mother blanker, to game plan for. Those things matter, right? So now you have two guys in the interior that, are in a space where other people respect it. Not only just the fan base, like, oh yeah, Grady's good. Yeah, it's cool. That's cool and everything. You have the support. But when other teams say that and other teams acknowledge that when they're game planning, that's when you have someone. But now the Falcons have two of those guys, and for Onyemata to understand, like, this is still Grady's team, this is still Grady's unit, and he's going to be the leader of this team. He just want to add to it. He just want to add that specialness on Sundays that we've been looking for, and clamoring for. Hashtag pass rush matters. Hashtag stop the run matters. All that good stuff.
Hashtag get him on the ground.
Hashtag get him on the ground.
I just added that one.
Yeah. And it's, maybe even kick him in the butt hind parts a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
With that
too. We play to the echo of the whistle on this team. Like, I would absolutely love to watch that on Sunday. So yeah, I think that when you have guys like that this early on, acknowledging and understanding what the deal is when they walk through this door up in Flowery Branch, I think that is just going to do nothing but help them build that chemistry that they need to build. And as far as from a rotational standpoint, who's going to play much, who's going to play this much, and I think that's going to help Ryan Nielsen get this thing figured out pretty quickly going into training camp.
Indeed. And of course, Mr. Arthur Blank was at practice as well, and you could see him having some conversation with Grady Jarrett and the newly minted in quotes, Calais Campbell. So good to see him out there as well. Also, good to see CP back. And one of the things that CP talked about yesterday was he really doesn't care how they use him. Would it be good to be used again like he was last season? In part, yes, because you got him in heavy rotation. So who doesn't want to get as many reps and snaps as he can? And of course, 2021 was where we really got a chance to see, oh, wow, okay, he really is as versatile as they say, just didn't see as much of him. Now the question becomes, you may or may not see as much of him, but Jarvis, you may see as much of him just maybe more as a pass threat than as a running threat, right? But the good of it is the fact that he is there to round out that running back group, right? Because a bunch of them, Bijan Robinson, for example, Scotty Miller, CP, those guys were actually going back and forth between getting some snaps as return men as well. So I think it's really interesting. And the reason I say that, Jarvis, is because in my opinion, if you're a Bijan Robinson, you can get as much information and you can soak up all there is to soak up when a CP is on the field, able to stand next to you. And I saw him giving him some feedback for reps when he was running, when he was in the slot, when he was practicing with the return team. That to me is important as well, to have that kind of veteran who has a very similar skill set to what you have and has been doing it at such a high level, not just across his entire career, but particularly to see him at his best in all three phases last season. And I say all three phases, meaning running, passing, and of course, returning.
And T, when you think about it, like, man, it's 32 years old.
32.
So, and he just turned 32 in March. So yeah, I'm not people who saying, "Oh, what his role gonna be?" It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter because guess what? He's not the only running back on this team 2 years ago where it was no choice where he had to doggone get the rock, 15 to 16 times a game because, Arthur Smith kind of kept him in. He even limited his touches back then, when he knew he needed them. And that was pretty much all he had, because, it knows Mike Davis wasn't doing anything. So I think right now, given the talent that you have, you got a running back in Tyler Algier who broke the rookie rushing record had been around since before, you and I were probably even born, T. You know what I'm saying? So when you think about that aspect of it, and now you bring in Bijan Robinson, who is all worldly, he's walking on water, he's turning water into wine and all that stuff. He's going to do all of that, And if you don't believe me, go to Aaron Freeman's Locked On Falcons. I promise you. He'll tell you all about what Bijan Robinson got going on, for the Atlanta Falcons this year. So I think that I'm so cool with, Cordarrelle Patterson having a reduced role, and at the end of the day, just from a schematic standpoint, right, Arthur Smith can play around with a lot of stuff because he can line Cordarrelle Patterson up at wide receiver. A lot of times, like when you have him and Bijan and potentially – Tyler Algier in the game at the same time. That's possible. That is a big possibility. So
yes,
the formations and everything are going to be something that Arthur Smith is going to be able to play around with. And frankly, T, I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to see how this thing plays out just from a Sunday to Sunday basis. This is going to be very interesting.
Oh yeah, I am too. I think it's almost like a kid in a candy store, right? Because you think about Arthur Smith and his ability to go with an 11, a 12, even a 13 package, if you will, is amazing. Mm-hmm. But the other one that I saw briefly yesterday, and I had to run a little bit before practice wrap, so I'm really interested, Jarvis, to see what your observations will be from Flowery today. And that is that intriguing battle at nickel. You think about Mike Hughes and him being brought in. But don't forget, there's a D Alford out there lurking. And listen, everydayers, right? Everydayers, if you want to weigh in, or if there's a position battle that you guys want us to take a look at and kind of hone in on, let us know. Drop that in the comments section because we really appreciate the fact that Locked On, and in particular ATL Day Ones, is your fans' choice for everyday coverage of the Falcons and really any team in our space, because Locked On, hey, you're our team and we are your team every single day. So don't forget to check us out on YouTube, drop us some comments, and check us out wherever you get your podcasts.
But T, this is For the Culture. It is the intersection between sports, entertainment, the culture, and sometimes whatever the hell we want to talk about, because it's just how we get down in the show. Today it's no different. And you know what, T? You know what I'm saying? My eyes a little watery, because my allergies getting to me. But, Sleepy Brown got a chance. He got caught up with in the airport. You know what I'm saying? They were doing, how they do the interviews in the airport nowadays. That seems to be a real thing. So they started asking Sleepy about, Outkast and how they going to get back together and do an album. That man said, and I quote, don't do it to yourself. It's not gonna happen. If you want to see us, it's gonna be Dungeon Family. He said, no, they not coming back together. T, like, why he had to do it like that? Like, why he had to put it in those words? Like, there's always hope, when it comes to certain things. You know what I'm saying? Like, all these old rock and roll bands that, did all these drugs together and split up for whatever reason, they coming back together. They touring, they doing that thing. Yep. But why he had to try to break a heart saying that Outkast will never put another album together? T, like, why he do us like that?
You know what, Sleepy? I rebuke you.
In the name of Jesus.
In the name of Jesus, and also in the name of hip hop. But anyway, here's the thing, Jarvis. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, my poor friend. He's gonna have a moment. So you have your moment. But here's what I think too. I'm gonna choose hope. I'm gonna choose faith. Because we've seen it happen time and time again where we've been told never, ever, 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 or ever, forever, ever, never. And all of a sudden, put enough money on the table or put a situation on the table. Now, here's the example I give for Outkast, because I don't think it would ever be about money for Dre or Big Boy, just keeping it real.
No doubt, yeah.
But what I do think is, what if Dre's son, like what if Seven, I think is his name, what if he is uber talented? And there is something where he says, I've got this idea. There's a track I want to put down, but this this track can't be done justice unless it's Dre and Big Boy.
Ooh.
I could see him coming back for his son.
Yeah.
Same thing if Big Boy has a son who wants to go into the industry and it's a similar situation. Like that's where I can see them coming back together. I think the other piece there is this, and I thought of two bigs. You mentioned rock and roll, so I'm going to go rock and roll. No one ever thought the Eagles were ever going to get back together. No Stevie Nicks, no Christine McVie.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow they got it back together and it was magic. So things do happen like that. And as a firm, diehard, any for lifer, New Edition is another example. Lord knows they break up to make up, and they love to say, like, Bobby. What was that foolishness?
Just one word, Bobby.
Exactly. Really, it's just Bobby. Is Bobby coming this time? Is Bobby going to be up? I mean,
Bobby going to be there. Bobby going to show
up. It's never
up.
really New Edition broke up until about 3 years ago.
Right.
There was an opportunity, just real quick, there's an opportunity after the miniseries to go on tour. They could have made an absolute killing, but they couldn't get the dollars right. So much so that Johnny and Ralph went one way and then RBRM went another way. And I was so angry because I was like, how do you have the unmitigated gall to do some RBRM foolishness? Because that's what it was for me, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, now it's all six all the time because they got picked up by the right agency. They got enough of that crap ironed out and realized there's enough money to go around for six people, because if you go to an arena, we will come and we're going to sell it out. And that way everybody gets their cut. So thankfully, it seems like New Edition, Any for Life is now going to be an all six situation for as long as we have them on this side of heaven. So yes, Sleepy Brown, I respectfully disagree and will keep hope alive for my brother Jarvis that his favorite group of all time and our guy Andy Bunker, they will come back. And one more thing, Jarvis, while I'm on a tangent, I deserve another chance at Outkast.
Yes,
period.
I know. Yes, for T, not only for me, but T as well. And, here's what keeps me hopeful, because, Killer Mike just dropped the album, and, Andy Bunk, I'm glad you brought up Andy, because Bunk hit me. He was like, hey, man, have you heard the song? I was like, no, I have not heard the song. What song are you talking about? He was like, Andre 3000 is on the track. I was like, where is it? And I need to find it right now. So it's scientists and engineers. Killer Mike, he's on Killer Mike's album. So he's a feature on there. And it's just quintessential Andre 3 Stack. So as long as he's out here dropping features, I know at some point, I don't care if I'm 50 years old or 60 years old, T, I will be at that doggone concert. I will buy that album. Who knows where albums will be bought by then? You know what I'm saying? I still struggle with buying albums and where to buy them nowadays. So, we'll figure it out when we get there. But yeah, Sleepy man, you need to chill out, bro. You tripping. Yeah. Come on, let it go. But what we won't let go of is the fact that the Braves, although it may have taken them 24 hours, they will avenge that crazy loss in extras from Monday to the Tigers, hopefully by getting one, if not two games in this doubleheader today. The first game, Jarvis has a first pitch at 1:10. That'll be still Spencer Strider against Reese Olson. But the second game, actually, we just got confirmation that it is now Dylan Dodd instead of AJ Smith-Shawver, who's going to get that starting game 2 against Michael Lorenzen. So we will be debriefing on that. Jarvis is headed up to Flowery. Safe travels, my friend. Can't wait to hear what you got to say about your observations from day 2 of mandatory minicamp. And we'll bring you any and everything that is all things sports Atlanta, you everydayers, because we appreciate you guys, and we will see you tomorrow. Absolutely. And make sure, if you don't do anything else with your lives, share love, show love, and most importantly, spread love.